Hey everybody, I am back from San Diego Comic-Con. It's been about a week since I got back. I know I'm getting to this video a little late, but it was all very short notice. And for the patrons who are watching, you're probably wondering why you're not getting this video 24 hours ahead of YouTube overall. Well, don't worry, I'm working on something very special for the Patreon page, so you'll be getting that before anybody else. But this I just needed to get out there while it was already, already too late. But I was approached by my day job, and it was just a few weeks before the convention, and they said, we need somebody to go out to San Diego and do some videography for some press junkets for NBC. And I was like, oh, cool. I said, okay. At first, I didn't even realize what they were doing in San Diego because we have a market out there, and I thought, or my company has a market out there. Not the company I work for has a market out there, and I thought I was just going out there to do some random thing. I said, "Oh, what's the project?" And they said Comic-Con. I was like, "Whoa," because I've never been. It's sort of the show, as it were, for people who love sci-fi and fantasy and movies. And so I went out there to do these press junkets, film all of them and all that kind of stuff. I actually filmed it with the camera that you're seeing right now, and or that's filming me right now. I think Comic-Con, from my impressions of it, because I've gone to sci-fi conventions for the last 15, 20 years, and they're usually very fan-run affairs, and that's not a slam. They're usually driven by, the passion for science fiction and fantasy and pulp and comic book material from all decades. And this event, as a first-timer, it felt more like when I interned at the Cannes Film Festival for Kodak. It felt more like the Cannes Film Festival than it did, say, Dragon Con in Atlanta or Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle. A lot of the business of the convention, a lot of the fun happens outside of the convention center. Much like the Cannes Film Festival, everything happens in the hotels on the Riviera, outside the Palais. Similarly, everything happens outside the convention center as far as the costuming. That's all out in the street in the gas lamp district, literally on the other side of the tracks from the convention center. All of the business of Hollywood is taking place in those hotels. The interviews, the press junkets, the marketing, the deals, the handshakes, that's all taking place in those hotels, which is identical to the Cannes Film Festival. And then a lot of the promotion of new IPs or new performances or things like that are literally happening sometimes right out there on the street with pop-up experiences like the Brooklyn Nine-Nine experience. While not a new IP, it's one that they had a pop-up building for to promote it. That's very Cannes Film Festival. And both of those things are driven by the film industry. Comic-Con has really been usurped in a way by the film industry or co-opted by the film industry. So I had some time to myself between the press junkets that I was at. I went to press junkets for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Good Place, Winona Earp, and The Magicians. And then in between, I was doing various sort of me things to do. I went to the convention center, and I went to the exhibit hall. And the thing about the exhibit hall that was interesting was, obviously, it was super crowded. All the big companies were there. It was pretty impressive to see all that stuff on display. I went to the Hasbro booth. I went to the Mattel booth. I went to the Sideshow booth. I went to the Tamashii Nations booth. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The Bondi booth. I saw the Funko booth.
And that's why our
I had no interest. And then, then they have like the Warner Brothers booth and the Disney booth and the Doctor Who booth. But a lot of it is just merch and retail. Get those exclusives. They set up these cashier storefronts so that you can just stand in these switchback lines with the nylon ribbon, railings and switch back and forth and then stand at a cash register. Like the Doctor Who booth was just a big series of cash registers so that you could buy merch. The Hasbro booths were sort of split up. There was the Hasbro Pulse area with the previews and all that kind of stuff. So they had Unicron on display and the Cookie Monster and all that ridiculous stuff that they're doing. But then they also had, like all the Marvel Legends stuff that they're coming out with in the next few months, and that was on display. And I found myself in a situation where the stuff I was interested in, like the Peggy Carter action figure and things like that, those weren't for sale. Those were just things that they're saying, yeah, they'll be around in a few weeks to a few months. Oh, well, I've already seen pictures of these on the internet, so what's the value in seeing them here? I don't know. Saw a lot of long lines for various things. Hall H, where they were doing all the big previews and things like that. And I'm at a place in my life where I'm just not interested in standing in lines to go see things like that, especially when it's a lot of times at Comic-Con, it's stuff that they won't even really talk about. They're just saying, hey, we're going to come out with a movie in a year or two. We can't tell you anything about it because that would be spoiling it. It's all secret. But we want you to get excited about it. Well, I don't really see the value in that. So that's a lot of what it is. It's a lot of marketing and it's a lot of hype. And the advantage to going to Comic-Con for me was simply meeting people I'd never met before, people that I've talked to online, but I've never had the opportunity to really interact with face to face. So I was fortunate to meet Richard and Nick from The Toys That Made Us. They're producers on that show, and they introduced themselves to me, and that was really cool to finally meet them in person. We had some good chats. And then I got to meet some RetroBlasting supporters as well, Don and Greg. And I mean, that was really neat. It was really neat to as always, meet people face to face for the first time and have some good conversations. But it was very difficult to run into people there unless you were already in touch with them through Messenger and you all knew that you were there and you were coordinating actively. You missed a lot of people. Like I wanted to meet my friend Brad while I was there, but even though he and I were coordinating, we never could connect because there's just so many people and so much chaos. And then, of course, the convention center closes down at like 5:30, something like that. They shutter the doors, and then you're just out in the street for the street party, which I thought was a little weird because, at Dragon Con and Emerald City and places like that, although I think Emerald City, if I recall correctly, was in a convention center. I can't remember. It's been 5 years since I've been to that. But Dragon Con, for example, is at the hotels. Like the hotels is where everything happens. Whereas with Comic-Con, I noticed that all the costuming really takes place out in the street. And I assume that a lot of the fan life takes place in the hotels, like, in the surrounding Hiltons and Marriotts and everything like that. But I didn't get to go to a lot of those because my time was limited because I had 4 hours here to kind of look around and get the lay of the land. And then suddenly I was, oh crap, and I was off to another press junket. And I, running with my camera bag and everything. So, I mean, I'm glad I went. Like, I'm glad that I got to experience what is Comic-Con. I'm also glad that I went for free. I went on somebody else's dime and I went for a business reason because if I had just gone myself, with just a ticket, I don't think I would have wanted to stand in huge lines for hours and hours on end in the hopes of getting into something. I had the opportunity through the privilege of my job to kind of go behind the scenes. You know, I was 30 inches from Ted Danson. I was, just a foot away from Kristen Bell, and I got to meet, I didn't actually introduce myself, but I get to say that I, ran camera on an interview with Andy Samberg, and I did get to meet Orlando Jones, and I got to meet Terry Crews, and those are memories that will go with me, through the rest of my life, and that's extremely cool, and also, like I said, finally getting to meet people that I've only traded messages with online, but as far as going back, I equate it kind of like the Oscars. I don't watch the Academy Awards because it's 5 hours long, and who wants to watch all the commercial breaks? I just wait and see who won the awards the next day in the paper or on the internet. And in the case of Comic-Con, I feel like it's the same way. The bulk of what you get out of Comic-Con, you can get online, sometimes weeks before and sometimes less than a week after. Whether it's the trailers or pictures of the new toys, pictures of the new merch, props, all that kind of stuff, it's all going to be online. Seeing the Unicron from HasLab Pulse in person, for example, yeah, it's literally as big as they say it is in the pictures with the dimensions. You can't buy one there. So I guess I could stare at it through the plexiglass. But at the end of the day, I don't know if that would be worth me flying out there, paying the freight, paying for the ticket, paying for lodging, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad I could say that I've gone, but it's going to take something really special to bring me back. I didn't have a bad time. I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze on Comic-Con if you don't like standing in lines, if you don't like, being able to say you were the first person to see a trailer. It's like, yeah, I was the first person in the room to see Top Gun. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. I saw it on YouTube like an hour later. Woo. So yeah, I was really thankful that I got to hang out with some friends. Really thankful for some of the memories. Like I said, meeting Terry Crews was huge for me. Didn't expect that. But yeah, so we're working on a few videos over the next few weeks. We've got some good stuff coming up. I am working on Robotech Part 3. It is in the works, but I've got a few things in between that I'm doing. They are fully produced, feature-y kind of things that do involve toys. This is going to be something that I'm working on heavily, Space Lego right here. Might not come out before some of the other stuff I've mentioned, but it probably will be out before Robotech 3 if I was a betting person. This will definitely hit before Robotech Part 3 does. So hope you guys are having a good weekend, and I will see you on the next video.